series end. So that's that. Thank you to those who did not make it a chore, and kept the joy PF creation and of giving alive. And as always, thank you to my sponsors who paid for the time off work to write all of this. If you want a Volume 8, which is where the series is meant to end, the pitch for it is on ko-fi.com/tellingstories, where it is up for crowdfunding, along with Volume 9 of Who Endures. Crowdfunding pays for my unpaid time off from work to write. There's a lot left for me to write, of course, but it'll be quite some time before I come back here to post it. My thanks to those of you who made this fun while it lasted. If you want to read new chapters of new works, my Patreon is /tellingstories, my Ko-fi will get regular updates, and of course my Discord readers get new content almost every day. If you have trouble getting in, let me know. We use two-factor authentication to keep the bots out, and it sometimes fails. It's as simple as me giving you a role though, and you'd get in. In addition, I put all my original works on Amazon with an option to read for free on Kindle. So enjoy. Titles: Evolution of a Nobody, Evolution of a Nobody, Bad Dreams, Who Endures, Strange Lands, Who Endures, Trust and Betrayal, The Strongest in the World, Countdown, Scales of Trust. Volume 8 Possible Story. Volume 8 will feature the slain theocracy in the post-tournament period, surrounded by hostile nations with no possible allies, no trading partners, a collapsing economic system that is abhorrent to all, and show them struggling with the challenges of a changing world full of people hostile to their previously enticing beliefs. Demalbion's rise spawns an attempt on the life of the Queen of Frost. The elf-friendly Draconic Queen and the Wolf Queen of the Kingdom of Kani are both happy to harbor runaway slaves, severely damaging the ability of the theocracy to feed itself, and Ainz turns his eye on the last real opponent. While the nations of humanity and non-humans alike independently and openly declare the godhood of the Allfather of the Empire of Nazarick, with a seventh god, or fifth, is added to the pantheon who declares the common law of shared submission to a single throne regardless of heritage or race, the holdouts of the theocracy will struggle valiantly as insurrection from a long-buried enemy begins to stir. Thanks for reading to the end. And if you're not on those platforms, well, see you again in about 6 months or so with Volume 8. Smile. Till then, wish me luck. Volume 9 of Who Endures. The war against the Beastmen and all of Mektaratz looms large, with Nua preparing herself for the worst of the worst, and trying to save the world she has come to love, from everything that threatens to destroy it. Volume 8, Darkest Before Dawn C1. The One Who Stayed, Darkest Before Dawn. Book 8 in the series The One Who Stayed. It's good to see you again, Nua, Raymond said when they were alone after the 5th such visit in as many years. Her ears wiggled when he spoke, giving away her happiness despite the neutral face she tried to hold. The neutral mask broke into a little smile. I can't pretend with you, can I? She asked him and looked up the long, winding stairs that went up to the tower. They won't overhear? She asked. He shook his head. Magic noise suppression. Good, Nua said and put a hand on his chest. Do you still? About me, us? She asked. I'm loyal to my country, Raymond said and covered her hand with his, but that means something else to me than it used to. I don't want to see it destroyed. Nua looked down at his feet. How many? She asked. I got 3 more out this week. That brings me up to 100 since I came back from my last trip. Not many but it makes a difference to them, Raymond said to her, and she pursed her lips. That fits. Then I'll tell you something that you don't know yet. 2 somethings, actually. You're saving my people, so I'll try to save some of yours. Nua replied to him, and Raymond cocked his head. What is it? He asked, his intense eyes almost melting her heart even to feel locked on her. Your Black Scripture Captain, he disappeared, am I right? Or am I wrong? She asked him, and his deep eyes widened at the question. Yes, you're right, he was sent somewhere by the Pontifex Maximus. Raymond answered as they drew close to the door at the base of the steps. He is about to become the king of Demalbion. I'm going to be attending his coronation soon, Nua said, and went still while she waited for the news to sink in. So he was sent there. His teeth clicked as his jaw snapped shut. The Queen tells us they've been friends for years. When he got the order to kill her, he went off and seduced her instead. She's making him the king. You've lost the most powerful members of the Black Scripture. You've got Zesshi to the north, and Demalbion and its territorial ambitions to the west. Territory? Raymond felt ice grip his heart. The mountains, get your people away from those, you're going to lose them. Even I don't know much, but start moving that population away from there as much as possible, open up new farmland and offer it freely to Pharaon residents, do something, or you'll have a massacre on your hands. That's all I can tell you, Nua said, and then leaned forward and kissed him hard on the lips. He returned it, reaching up, he stroked her ears and felt her shiver at his touch, but just as she was the aggressor, she also cut it off, pulling back before things could go farther. I need to go. You be careful, I don't want to lose you, Nua said, and Raymond answered with the same conviction. The same to you. Even coming here as an ambassador is dangerous. He pointed it out, and she shrugged. At least this way I can leave, before, I couldn't. Till next we meet, Cardinal Raymond Zagloranzan, Nua said and patted his cheek with one calloused hand before she opened the oaken door and strode out into the light of day. He watched her until she got into the waiting carriage of green and gold, but followed it with his eyes until it was well out of sight, and only then did he close the door, turn around, and head back the way he came. Elon ascended the mountain pass with ease. His vampiric limbs carried him without even the slightest hint of exhaustion all the way back to his mountain hideaway. The elves atop the wall who guarded the pass drew their bows and aimed at him. He did a little flip, landed on his feet, and bowed with one arm out and one folded in front of his waist as if he were a performer. He could hear the strings and use relax when he was recognized by the means he used to entertain some of the liberated elven children and set them at ease after their radical change of scenery. Father! The elves shouted to him as he came closer, and he waved with a contented smile on his face until he reached the broad wooden gate. Did you have any luck? He knew what they were asking about, still nothing. Elon admitted as he walked under the shadow of the gate and back into his home. Perhaps Nua died a long time ago. It wasn't the first time he'd had that thought in the last 150-odd years, but even so, I can't stop looking for her. I just can't. Even if she never forgives me, I just can't stop. A young raven-haired woman dove into his arms. She bared her fangs to him when she smiled up at his face. Father, welcome home, she said. Her delicate hands traced around his back, squeezed, and then drew away after her embrace was briefly returned. Thank you. I managed to get a few more. They can be picked up in Pharaon this week, but it's starting to cost more. Elon nodded and put a hand on top of her head the way he had when she was young. Be a lamb and negotiate twice as hard when it comes to iron sales. She tittered a little and rose up on her tiptoes into the pat upon her head. Father, you're so silly, you really need to pay more attention to what's going on out there. There's an iron shortage now, we can demand a premium for ingots without any effort whatsoever. She answered him and went back down onto the balls of her feet. Just relax, everything will be fine. The elves will keep any iron poachers out the way they always have, and when you're ready, and they're not. Her red eyes pulsed with bloodlust. That's my girl. Now what about the Demalbion representative? Did we get what we wanted? Elon pressed, and she snapped her fingers and gave him a sharp, decisive nod. In spades. When we're ready, we'll just tell Pharaon that the mines ran dry. I doubt the theocracy will be able to do much more than station some soldiers along the mountain base when the invasion of the mountains begins. She answered, and again there was a warm glow of satisfaction in Elon's gut. I've got myself a lioness who can both think and fight. When all is said and done, I know who I can leave in charge. He thought with confidence, and then followed her into the only mountain elf village in the world, his earlier disappointment comforted by the promise of progress, and an end to the slain theocracy. Naya extended her hand to her mate. Senna took it and allowed her to pull him up from the bed. How long do you think it will be before they assume I'm dead? He asked of the Dragonid Queen. Naya shrugged. I'm not from the theocracy, but that depends. Do you just get things done and go home, or are you the sort to spend a lot of time planning it all out? He cocked his head and stared at her silently. Right. Dumb question. Naya rolled her eyes at herself. Anything that gets between you and your rest and relaxation is to be discarded or destroyed. So it won't be long. No, not long at all. Just remember one thing, Senna said, and as he rose to his feet he put a hand on her shoulder. I will help you, but I want my comrades taken alive. From time turner to one-man army. Naya's fearsome gaze wasn't able to soften much, but he felt it in her expression regardless. If I can, for you, I will. I won't ask my people to die for them, but if your friends can be ensnared safely, I'll do it. Their lives will be my wedding gift to you. She put her hand up to his cheek, her tail swayed low behind her. Naya's eyes welled up. You chose me. Nobody, absolutely nobody in my entire life has ever chosen me over anything or anyone. So of course, for you, I'll try to accomplish the impossible. I even reached out to the All-Father to ask for help. It will be our first joint forces operation. Our scouts, mages, and of course, I will be the bait, and several of his elite teams. When it succeeds, and we wed, he will perform the ceremony, and then I will bend my knee to him. She laughed at him when he stared at her. You wanted your friends at your wedding, now they will be, though they might not be dressed for the occasion. Naya teased him and wiped her eyes. Chosen over a whole country, you know how to make a woman feel appreciated, that's for damn sure. Naya added and rose on her tiptoes to embrace him. He returned it, and let her topple him back down into the bed one more time. We can start the day a little late. Royalty has its privileges, he thought, and stopped using the head he no longer needed to focus instead on the one he did. Volume 8 C2. Alan Beaumont of the Time Turbulence stretched his legs out against a tree, his arms folded behind his russet brown hair, his small top hat tilted forward so that the brim shielded his eyes from the sun. A little straw of wheat rolled back and forth with his shifting jaw. The captain isn't much of a leader for us to go to all this trouble for him. But then again? Then again? Cedron asked while wiping the enchanted white cloth over the shield in his lap, a regular but needless routine. The enchanted equipment would get rid of dust on its own. But still he wiped it down with an enchanted cloth that would have made any smith drool over its ability to polish with minimal effort. His tree trunk-like muscles were tense, and his intense focus on his equipment belied his discomfort with their surroundings. Then again, that's what I like about him, you know? Alan plucked the straw from his mouth and rolled it between his fingers. You're weird, Quayes said, floating down from above as gently as a feather. Nothing around us, at least not that I can see. He added and ran a hand through his short golden hair. Well, think about it. Alan twirled a finger through the long strand of brown hair that hung past his shoulder. His green eyes sparkled with the warning of impending humor. I'm comfortable right here, right now. It's a beautiful day, the sun is shining, all is right with the world. Except for the traitor to humanity holding our captain prisoner. Beaumarchais of the Divine Chain added, his hand twirled a handspan of his long chain, his dark eyes searching elsewhere despite Quayes's insistence that they were alone on the open grassy plain before the Demalbian border. Right, that, Alan acknowledged, but, like, nobody nowhere has got to tell me to just sit back and enjoy this, right? Just the cool breeze and a few good friends and a lethally dangerous mission against a monster strong enough to beat Senna and keep him prisoner. Oh yes, it's so marvelous. Corwin Amber, the strongest human, laid the sarcasm on thick and drummed his fingers on the blade of his giant axe. Alan pursed his lips and cleared his throat, and the constant tendency of my comrades to interrupt my thoughts. He retorted, then went on saying, and a good meal to go with it. He gestured to the bowl holding the remnants of the rabbit stew made by Tenjo, who still worked the spit while they waited for the others to rejoin the group. But now here we are, about to go and risk our lives. It's fine for the captain, Alan hastened to add and put his left hand on the swirl-patterned rapier that lay at his side, but they ask us to do all these wild things all the time. It seems to me that leadership is just a way of getting people to do shitty things that you'd never waste your time or risk your life on unless somebody got you to do it. Inspiring. Tenjo grunted. He stopped stirring long enough to look over at the lazing Alan. You're saying leadership is shit? No. I'm just saying it gets you into shit and maybe the whole damn world would be better off with fewer leaders and more R&R. Alan retorted. And you are the one in charge? Sasala asked, tapping his staff on the ground while he walked toward Tenjo and extended his now empty bowl. How did that happen? Because I know Senna better than anyone, and our captain was never one to take stupid chances. Alan retorted, besides, our astrologer says that he's going around with only a handful of demi-human guards, he's not being tortured. Hell, she said, he's smiling. If he's in trouble, I'm the Allfather. She could be tricked, you know. Sasala of the Mystic Will, the third seat of the Black Scripture, implied. You could just try to take this more seriously than you are. Alan dropped the straw from his hand and down to the green grass, his eyes focused intently on the third seat. I take this very seriously. I'm thinking like the captain does, trying to get inside his head. Why do you think Tenjo here is so willing to take the time to make big meals and is slow to clean up after you slobs? I'm thinking like he thinks. That's how we'll figure out what he's up to. Every eye of the present black scripture seat snapped over to him and then lowered in apology. Sorry, was mumbled from many mouths. The uncomfortable silence kept anyone from eye contact until Cedron spoke up. So, do you have any ideas? Well, yeah, actually. Alan answered, ignoring the possibility of illusion. Since we can always just say it's possible, the captain could probably easily beat his guards, but he's not. Thousand League astrologer says that he was laughing, smiling, eating big meals, and he's been seen chatting amiably in the company of the traitor of humanity at some of their building projects. He's even been seen dueling high-ranking demi-humans. None of that should make sense except, if he gave his word he wouldn't try to escape. You're joking. Why make a promise like that? Quaes asked and slapped the trunk of a tree, snapping it in half to fall on the ground. His eyes narrowed. That sounds a lot like treason. Don't be so sensitive, Quaes. Not everyone is your sister. That's not what I mean. Alan answered, and with the oddity of his theory, the scripture seats began to drift toward him to hear him out. What I mean is, before the dragon it was that she was a soldier, and a damn good one if the intel we got was right. I'm thinking that she beat him and made a deal to make him more comfortable. Senna gives his word not to run off, and she gives him freedom of movement and plenty of creature comforts. It's the sort of deal a soldier would take, and it's the sort of deal Senna would take. He's too important to just kill. She probably wants to trade him for some concessions or to embarrass the Cardinals or the Pontifex Maximus. What I'm saying is that this is a great big waste of time, that we were sent out to risk our lives for the captain, when he's in no danger. That the only real danger is to the reputations of the idiots who sent him out there alone against something he couldn't beat. Loren of the Long Lance, 6th seat of the Black, finished the sentence and stabbed the tip of his weapon into the grass. Son of a bitch. Yup. Alan added to the consternation of his comrades. We're going out to risk our lives for someone who is in no real danger, to die for the stupid decisions of fuckholes. That's what I'm saying, and knowing Senna, he figured it out pretty much the same. So? Alan waved a hand toward the pot. Finish off the stew and take your time. The border will still be there tomorrow, the captain will still be fine tomorrow, and we can still throw our lives away tomorrow if it comes down to it. What's one more big meal but a little more enjoyment before we get caught up in all that leadership we're always hearing about? He snorted with disgust, then stretched out his arms, picked up the dropped bit of straw and began to chew on it again while the rest of the camp finally, visibly relaxed a little. Emperor Anglaeus and his empress stood outside the monastery door. The wisest monk in the empire waited within. Do you think he'll see us today? Zeshi asked. Her hand closed into his, though she didn't squeeze. While Brain was far stronger than he'd ever been in the past, it wasn't unknown to her that his victory over her in the arena had been determined by the aid of a god, and so she was gentle in the way she held him in her grip. Brain, however, didn't hesitate to squeeze her hand. The walls of the monastery could be easily breached if he chose to use force, and if he wanted, the wise monk could have been dragged out and carried bodily to our winter to be thrown down at the feet of the emperor and empress. But such a use of his power set the emperor on edge. The monk's insistence on answering only by letters, acting only as an advisor to anyone and everyone who asked, was also bizarre. I don't know. But we've come every year since we took the throne. It's been a very nice holiday every time, and I haven't minded that much, Brain said and turned an eye toward Princess Layali. She was clad in silks gifted by the Allfather of the Empire of Nazarick, bright greens and blues in ruffled patterns, and enchanted against all manner of harm. But it came with one other feature, a little blue ribbon that bound her hair close to her head. Attracted butterflies. They batted their wings around her, alighted on her hand, her cheek, her hair. All she had to do was stay still and their brilliant colors would shroud her like a second set of clothes. Her shining face and bright eyes, together with her gentle and giving nature, made her a popular princess in our winter, and the affinity for butterflies seemed to only add to her enchanting mystique. So it barely bothered Brain or Zeshi that the scholarly monk whose letters often guided imperial policy behind the scenes, refused to meet anyone face to face to give advice. It was just one more mystery. I couldn't agree more, but I can't help but feel a little affronted. She answered while they waited for the wide wooden gate of the monastery to open for them again. Brain inched a little closer to his wife's side. I can't help but think that before all the things with us happened, she'd have just broken down the walls and called it a day. At least she's mellowed a little with time. He thought and squeezed her hand a little tighter. I'm sure it's not personal. Remember, he's refused to meet with anyone. It's not about you, and it's not about what you are. Brain promised her with a whisper that caused her half-elven ears to twitch a little when his warm breath caressed her skin. The gate finally groaned its way open and the royals and their escort strode within. The brown robes of the monks hung loose around their hands, their hoods were down and they bowed deeply to the emperor, his wife, and the princess. The bows held until the gates closed again, and the serious faces of the aged grandfatherly monks broke out into smiles as Layali made herself the ambassador of the royal family. Hi Uncle Eyebrows. Hello Uncle Long Nose. Her childish innocence and familiar pet names for the old men resorted in a sea of smiles. Her utter sincerity in her affections made her almost like a mascot in their eyes. Having no children or grandchildren of their own, the princess wormed her way into a void in their collective hearts that many denied existed until it was filled. My emperor, empress. Welcome, welcome. The abbot of the monastery said as soon as he emerged, his bushy white eyebrows framed deep blue eyes that still sparkled with intelligence. His frail arms were wide apart and revealed the blotchy skin common to old men. He hadn't the ability to kneel much any longer, but his words spoke for him. Unlike the others, he wore a pure white robe passed down for centuries from the first emperor of the Baharuth Empire. And of course, welcome to you, Princess Layali, he said with an indulgent pearl-white smile when the little princess pursed her lips up at him and showed him the side of her face to let him kiss her cheek. Welcome, that's a wonderful outfit you're wearing, you look beautiful. Layali brushed her hands down the dress to smooth out its ruffles for a moment to show the little sparkly bits hidden except when one walked just right and it caught the light. It's a gift from Lord Demiurge of Nazarick, picked out by the maids as a reward. They always give me nice stuff to show they're glad I help them with things. I see, so are you their ambassador then? That's good training for a princess. When you're the empress one day, you'll have to deal with many different peoples. The empire will be lucky to have so well-trained a ruler in command. The abbot said, and Layali put a forefinger to her dimple before she looked away and thought. I guess it's kind of like being an ambassador. I just help them with things only I can do, and they say thank you with nice things afterward that are good for me and good for Papa and Mama's empire. Did you like the Lotso fruit we got? That was me. She beamed when his mouth dropped open and he looked at the emperor and empress. It's true, she said, we mentioned an interest in growing some since those big red things are so, she licked her lips, juicy and filling, and good for a cough too. She goes over, and when she comes back, it's a signed treaty agreeing to hybridize some just in our land for the next 5 years with cheap deals for the peasants for the next 8. I guess the Allfather has a thing for making small children happy. Remarkable, he said and scratched his bald head. His wrinkled face lit up. It's usually a bit of a strain on the conscience to say the next ruler is really talented, but I'm glad to know I don't have to lie about it now. The scholar, he has a saying about this. The abbot cleared his throat and did his best to imitate his fellow monk. Empires rise because of talent, but not every son is as good as his father, and when empires fall, it is because of those inevitable lapses of talent, the inescapable problem of inherited rule, that goes on from one generation to the next. The abbot said and then scratched his cheek, his face flushed a little red. Not to say anything negative about your majesties, of course. It's just something he said about the empire's history. You can always trace a collapse to an idiot unfit for his job. Brain rubbed the lobe of his left ear between thumb and forefinger. Well, it sounds true but I'm no scholar. Just a lucky she interrupted and cleared her throat. Very lucky swordsman. Brain finished and his wife smirked a little and tilted her chin up with smug appreciation of his added praise. That, my emperor and empress, describes the first of all kings, the abbot said, and then he turned to the side and waved his way toward the grey stone walls that made up their home and place of work. Now, if it pleases you, I'll take you to the scholar's door. The princess can go play if she wishes, we have new horses in. He dangled out the possibility, and Layali looked up between her parents. Yes, the two said, and added again at the same time, but be careful. It was needless, while Layali could be injured, even grievously. As her body evidently rejected death, and healers were always on hand. Any problem wasn't. Which did nothing to stop either from cautioning her. "I'll be careful," she promised, unsure even for herself whether she was lying when she took off at a run toward the stables. Volume 8 C3. Dominic Carapatouche wore a heavy frown on his face while he sat alone in his office. "How seriously should I take this, Yavin?" Dominic asked of the elf at his side. Yavin closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Whenever his master asked him a question, it merited the most sincere answer. Dominic waited. After a lifetime, he knew Yavin's answer would be well thought out, and having shared every scrap of paper and report with his boyhood servant, he had high expectations. Yavin finally opened his eyes and set the glass of wine on the desk, 2 fingers width away from his master's grip. "Master, I say this with the understanding that it in no way implies any desires of my own. I have been with your family since I was rescued from the Hodges, and I will never, ever leave the service of your house. If they wish to take me from here, they will have to drag my corpse from your side." "I know, Yavin. I know," Dominic answered the elf in a gentle voice he never used for any others of Yavin's race, and took up the glass. In the office of Dominic Carapatouche, there was one difference from all the rest of the estate. Every room of the house had a whip on the wall. Though they never needed to be used, their presence was reminder enough. None of the elven servants defied the master of the house. But the wall of his inner office had no lash on display, ready for use. The walls had only art, paintings, and the occasional award from his service years. There was no implement of violence or control, and there was no need, because no elf was allowed within the office except for one. "Master," Yavin said, "I believe you should take this very seriously. The nations all around us are offering a safe haven to runaways. Years ago, the Draconic Kingdom depended on us for their survival. Now they turn up their noses and rely on the forces of the Allfather. King Mayor's forces keep all raids by would-be slave takers at bay without any success. And the traitoress of the Divine has taken the captain hostage. Even Zashi has turned on us." Yavin crouched down and put his hand on Dominic's lap. It was an unthinkable act from any other elf, but from Yavin it was as natural and comfortable and welcome as that of a favorite uncle to his nephew. Dominic nodded. In a few lines, Yavin summed up half their problems. The other scriptures were sent to rescue him and kill the Queen of Frost. If they succeed, the whole of their little Zudok kingdom will collapse. When it does, everyone will see that those really are just slightly intelligent beasts. They'll see. They have to. "Master, did you hear what you said?" Yavin pressed with a quiet voice, his luminous eyes no longer blinking at the unthinkable. "What?" Dominic inquired, caught off his guard by Yavin's quiet intensity. "Master, you said, if they succeed." Yavin pointed it out, and Dominic sucked in his teeth. "I did. Didn't I?" Dominic's dark eyes shut for a moment and he tried to imagine failure. It seemed impossible for the Black Scripture to fail, but if they did? The world lay out before his mind's eye as if he were thousand-league astrologer, not over distance, but time as the implications came down on him. The Black, defeated or captured, all our best weapons gone, they're equipped with treasury weaponry, we lose so much. We have no allies left. Even with our army being strong as armies go, we can't defeat every surrounding nation and impose our will. Not without champions on par with theirs, and the Allfather's forces are at least as strong as our best, and he is vastly stronger than. The path of war laid out before Dominic Carapatouche, Cardinal of the Theocracy. He saw the fields of wheat and burned to cinders, Kami Miyako starving as the kingdom of Kani simply moved its armies just over the border and occupied the vast latifundias and set the elves free by force. Ikari's iron governor couldn't hold back a nation by itself. The distance between the two places was short, and the Wolf King and Queen were now experienced and well prepared for war. The Elf Kingdom under King Mayor was a de facto province of the Allfather, so no new slaves could be captured from there officially without war, a war Dominic tried to imagine winning. I can't picture a victory, not without all of humanity united against him, and even then. Dominic lowered his eyes, set his glass down, and then rested his now heavy head into his hands. Even if we succeed in getting the captain back and killing the Queen of Frost, there's no getting us out of this, is there? We're going to have to do something drastic. You mean to abide by their demands? Yavin asked. Dominic tugged at his dark hair. I think. Yes, sort of. Right now they're demanding prisoners of war be returned, since the war is over. How many slaves does that make? Master, in the last 120 years of war, the slain theocracy has taken 30,572 prisoners of war from the Elf Kingdom. They mostly work in the large latifundias around Wheaton and Ekery, but a substantial number serve in other capacities. Small farms, crafts and trades. Yavin answered immediately. And if we were to do as the Elf Kingdom demands? Dominic asked. Then the wheat would lie unharvested in the fields. Yavin answered at once. The slain theocracy would either starve or... Dominic swallowed the lump that put into his throat, his fingers tightened their grip on his scalp, or we would have to force humans to do it. We would have to make slaves of humans. Or we would have to start importing food, tons of it. We would lose our main export to the Dark Elves and become an import nation, dependent on outsiders and... In that moment, Cardinal Dominic Ilpartouche saw worse than the death of his nation. If we died in a fiery glorious fight to the end, the light of our memory would inspire mankind for generations and ensure humans would one day rise again. But this isn't a glorious warrior death. This is an old man's gasping pathetic whimper. And what if we refuse? How long before the other countries arm the elven slaves and start a war? The more Dominic thought, the worse things looked. The demand that the prisoners of war be returned was as good as a demand that the slain theocracy ruin itself. And that was without considering the next likely demand. The release of all the elves. Dominic looked out of the corner of his eye toward his side where Yavin still crouched. I cannot help but think, Yavin, that when we began to take the elves, the ones to do so, they were fools. They decided to ride a tiger, and never wondered how they would let it go or get off of it when they got where they wanted to be. If we release the slaves, we will have to make slaves of our own. No human would willingly do work that has been labeled as slave work for this long. We will destroy our economy and make ourselves a low, dependent nation. Our pride cast down into the dust. Everything will be ruined. And if we don't, we may be ruined anyway. Master, you're wise, hot-tempered, but clever, cunning. There has to be an answer. Perhaps if you called a few of your comrades together away from the burdens of government, have them for dinner, drink with them, speak to them the way common people talk politics in the market. Away from the burden of decision, maybe they will be more creative too? Yavin suggested, and Dominic took a heavy breath. Yavin, this isn't just you trying to find some way to get me to relax a little, is it? Dominic asked, politely overlooking the true statement about his temper. Yavin stood up and poised himself as the regal butler he'd been for over a century. Master, I'm sure I would never think of that as my motivation. It is merely an added benefit. Dominic snorted and straightened up, resting his back against the leather center pinned against the dark wood. Then yes, invite the other cardinals, tomorrow if they can make it. There's no work then, so maybe, just maybe we can navigate ourselves through the thicket of thorns without bleeding ourselves dry. I'll have the invitations prepared at once, Master, Yavin said, bowed, and made his way out of the private study of the cardinal.